I never thought twice about being called into Mr. Anderson's office. After all, as his executive assistant for the past 2 years, our meetings were routine. That Tuesday afternoon seemed ordinary enough. Spreadsheets needed reviewing, the quarterly presentation needed finalizing. When he messaged, "Need to discuss something privately," I grabbed my tablet and walked down the hall. He smiled as I entered, that same professional smile I'd seen countless times. I was midway through a question about the Henderson account when I heard it, the distinct click of the lock engaging behind me. My words faltered as I turned to see his hand still on the door handle, his expression shifting to something unfamiliar. The tablet suddenly felt heavy in my grasp. "Is everything okay?" I asked, my voice sounding strange even to my own ears. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for hours. The email came through at 7:48 p.m., just as I was packing up to leave the office. The soft ping from my computer seemed innocent enough, but when I saw Marcus Bennett's name in the sender field, my stomach did a tiny flip. "Olivia, need to discuss something important. Can you stop by my office before you leave tonight?" MB. I stared at the message, reading it twice to be sure I understood. Marcus Bennett, CEO of Vertex Marketing, wanted to see me? At nearly 8 p.m.? I glanced around the mostly empty office floor, wondering if anyone else had received a similar message. My name is Olivia Chen, 27 years old, and I'd been at Vertex for just over 2 years as a campaign strategist. While I'd presented in meetings where Marcus was present and had occasional brief exchanges with him, he'd never specifically asked to meet with me one-on-one before, especially not after hours. I smoothed down my navy pencil skirt, suddenly self-conscious about my appearance after a long workday. My blouse was slightly wrinkled, and I knew my makeup had probably faded hours ago. "This can't be good," I murmured to myself. My mind raced through possibilities. Was it about the Westfield campaign? Had I made a mistake I wasn't aware of? Or, a more terrifying thought, was this about looming layoffs I'd heard whispered about in the break room? "On my way," I replied, trying to sound professionally neutral despite my growing anxiety. I grabbed my phone and quickly checked my reflection in my compact mirror, pinching some color back into my cheeks and running fingers through my dark hair. Whatever this was about, I wanted to at least look composed. The walk to the executive floor felt longer than usual. The usual bustling energy of the office had subsided, with most employees already gone for the day. Only the occasional glow of a computer screen from a late-working colleague broke the dim quiet of the space. My heels clicked against the polished floor as I made my way to the elevator. Inside, I pressed the button for the top floor, where the executive offices were located. As the doors closed, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall and took a deep breath, straightening my shoulders. The executive floor had a different feel from the rest of the building: thicker carpets, wood-paneled walls, and subtle, expensive artwork. The reception desk was empty, the assistant long gone. The silence felt weighted, expectant. I walked down the corridor toward Marcus's corner office. Light spilled from underneath his door, confirming he was still there. I paused for a moment, straightened my blouse one last time, and knocked gently. "Come in," called his deep voice from inside. I pushed open the heavy door to find Marcus sitting behind his impressive desk, his suit jacket removed and hanging on a nearby stand, his blue tie loosened. At 42, he commanded attention, tall, with dark hair graying attractively at the temples and the confident posture of someone used to people listening when he spoke. "Olivia," he said, his expression brightening as he stood. "Thank you for coming up so late. Please, close the door behind you." I did as instructed, the soft click of the door shutting sounding unnaturally loud in the quiet office. As I turned back to face him, he moved around his desk, gesturing toward the sitting area by the windows. "Have a seat," he offered. "Can I get you a drink?" I was just about to pour myself a scotch. "No, thank you," I replied automatically, perching on the edge of one of the leather chairs. "You wanted to see me?" Marcus smiled in a way that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I did indeed, Olivia. I think it's time we had a real conversation. Make sure to subscribe to my channel so I can continue bringing you more fascinating true stories like this one, and don't forget to watch this video till the end and like the video because this story is going to be incredibly interesting. Please hit the like button to show your support. I've always been the reliable one, the person who gets things done without drama. That's what made me good at my job at Vertex. I handled our clients' campaigns with methodical precision, anticipating problems before they arose and solving them when they did. My presentations were meticulously prepared, my reports comprehensive, my results consistently impressive. Growing up with Chinese immigrant parents who sacrificed everything for my education had instilled in me a relentless work ethic. Failure wasn't an option in the Chen household, excellence was the minimum expectation. I'd graduated top of my class, landed prestigious internships, and climbed steadily in my career, all according to plan. The one area where my carefully constructed life had fallen apart was my relationship with Ethan. After 3 years together, he'd ended things 6 months ago, citing my emotional unavailability and workaholic tendencies as reasons why we couldn't work. The breakup had blindsided me, leaving me questioning parts of myself I'd always taken for granted. "You're easier to admire than to love, Liv," he'd said during our final conversation, words that continued to echo in my mind during quiet moments. Since then, I'd thrown myself even more deeply into my work, using Vertex's demanding environment as a refuge. The more projects I took on, the less time I had to question Ethan's assessment or confront the emptiness of my apartment when I finally returned home each night. And at the center of the Vertex universe was Marcus Bennett. He'd built the agency from nothing into one of the top marketing firms in the city through sheer force of will and undeniable talent. Everyone in the industry knew his name, and his clients trusted him implicitly, as did his employees. Unlike other executives I'd encountered, Marcus never needed to raise his voice to command a room. He had a way of making his perspective clear with just a raised eyebrow or a subtle shift in tone. His feedback, whether positive or negative, was always precise and actionable, never vague or personal. I'd admired him from a distance since joining Vertex. In meetings, I found myself studying how he handled difficult clients, how he pivoted when strategies weren't working, how he motivated the team with just the right balance of challenge and praise. If I was honest with myself, I'd modeled much of my own professional style after his. There had been moments when I thought he'd noticed me too, a lingering glance during a presentation, a specific compliment on an insight I'd provided, the way he sometimes referenced my work when speaking to other executives. But I'd dismissed these observations as wishful thinking, the desperate imagination of someone seeking validation after rejection. Marcus was married, of course. His wife Elise was a corporate attorney, elegant and intimidating in her own right. I'd met her at the company Christmas party, where they'd moved through the room like a perfectly coordinated power couple, her hand proprietarily on his arm. They had twin teenage daughters who occasionally appeared in framed photos on his desk, but lately, those photos had disappeared. And Marcus had been staying at the office later, sometimes long after everyone else had gone home. The circles under his eyes had deepened, and his usual commanding presence occasionally slipped, revealing moments of distraction or weariness. "Everything okay?" I'd asked once, after a strategy meeting where he'd seemed unusually quiet. He'd looked startled, as if surprised that anyone had noticed. "Just busy," he'd replied, with a forced smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Nothing to worry about." But something about the way he'd looked at me in that moment, with a flash of vulnerability before the professional mask returned, had stayed with me, making me wonder what was happening behind the confident facade he presented to the world. Now, sitting across from him in his office after hours, that same question returned with new intensity. What was behind the carefully constructed image of Marcus Bennett, and why had he called me here to find out? Vertex marketing wasn't just a workplace, it was a finely tuned ecosystem of ambition, talent, and carefully managed relationships. On the surface, everything ran with the precision of a Swiss watch: pitches won, clients satisfied, campaigns launched. But beneath that polished exterior ran currents of competition, alliances, and politics that shaped every interaction. The office occupied 3 floors of a downtown high-rise. The 14th floor housed creative, designers, copywriters, and video producers whose spaces were decorated with mood boards and concept sketches. The 15th floor was account management, my territory, where glass-walled meeting rooms buzzed with client calls and strategy sessions. The 16th floor, where I sat now, was executive country, corner offices with skyline views and hushed conversations that determined the company's direction. My position as senior campaign strategist placed me somewhere in the middle of Vertex's hierarchy. I wasn't part of leadership, but I had more visibility with them than most, particularly since the Westfield campaign had taken off under my guidance. That success had put me on a shortlist for the recently opened Director of Strategy position, a fact that hadn't gone unnoticed by my colleagues. Teacher's pet, Nathan had muttered when Marcus had publicly praised my quarterly presentation. The comment had stung, but I'd kept my expression neutral. Results spoke louder than office gossip, and my results were undeniable. Lisa, my closest ally in the office, had been more supportive. "He's just jealous," she'd said over lunch. "Everyone knows you're the obvious choice for the promotion." "It's not guaranteed," I'd replied, picking at my salad. "There are other qualified candidates." Lisa had given me a knowing look. "Sure, but none with the track record you've built. Plus, Marcus clearly values your input." I'd changed the subject then, uncomfortable with the implication. Yes, Marcus sought my opinion in meetings and sometimes implemented my suggestions verbatim. But I told myself it was because my strategies worked, not because of any special favoritism. The executive floor existed in its own rarefied atmosphere, one that became increasingly tense in recent months. Rumors of a potential acquisition had everyone on edge, wondering which positions might become redundant. Diana, Marcus's executive assistant, had become even more protective of his schedule, eyeing me with thinly veiled suspicion whenever I needed to speak with him about a campaign. "He's in meetings all afternoon," she'd say, her manicured nails clicking against her keyboard. "I can ask him to call you if it's urgent." But when Marcus would spot me leaving, he'd often call out, "Olivia. Got a minute?" The look on Diana's face in those moments could have frozen hell over twice. Even more complicated was my relationship with Catherine, our HR director, who seemed to watch interactions between Marcus and female employees with particular attention. More than once, I'd caught her studying me during company events, her eyes narrowing when Marcus and I fell into easy conversation about industry trends. The Westfield campaign had only intensified the scrutiny. For the past month, Marcus and I had been working closely to develop a strategy that had brought in the largest account in company history. Late meetings, weekend emails, detailed feedback sessions, all perfectly professional, but enough to raise eyebrows. "You've been putting in a lot of hours with the CEO," Catherine had commented yesterday, cornering me by the coffee machine. "The Westfield account must be demanding." "It is," I'd replied, keeping my voice neutral. "But the results are worth it." Catherine had nodded slowly. "Just remember, Olivia, office relationships can become complicated quickly." The implication in her words had left me flustered and defensive. There was nothing inappropriate happening between Marcus and me. Was there? Now, as I sat in his office with night falling outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Catherine's warning echoed in my mind. What exactly had Marcus called me here to discuss that couldn't wait until morning? And why did the soft click of the door locking behind me suddenly feel so significant? The heavy office door clicked shut behind me with unexpected finality. I turned in surprise to see Marcus's hand lingering on the lock he'd just engaged. "For privacy," he explained with a casual smile that didn't quite match the intensity in his eyes. "You wouldn't believe how many people think nothing of barging in, even this late." I nodded, trying to ignore the sudden flutter in my stomach. Of course. The office looked different in the evening hours. Marcus had dimmed the overhead lights, leaving just his desk lamp and a floor lamp by the seating area illuminated. The effect transformed the usually businesslike space into something more intimate. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sparkled against the night sky, creating a backdrop that felt more suitable for a romantic dinner than a work meeting. "Can I offer you a drink?" Marcus asked, moving to a sleek credenza where crystal decanters caught the low light. I was just about to pour myself a scotch. "I should probably keep clear-headed for whatever we need to discuss," I replied, my professional mask firmly in place despite my growing unease. He turned, a bemused expression crossing his face. "Always the consummate professional, aren't you, Olivia?" I settled into one of the leather chairs facing his desk, my posture deliberately straight. You didn't call me here at 8 in the evening to compliment my work ethic. No, he agreed, pouring amber liquid into a single glass. Though it would be deserved. Instead of returning to his desk chair, Marcus surprised me by taking the matching leather chair beside mine, turning it slightly so we faced each other more directly. His knee nearly brushed mine, and I subtly shifted to maintain a professional distance. I've been reviewing the quarterly numbers, he began, sipping his scotch. Your campaigns are consistently outperforming the others. The Westfield account has already increased revenue by 18%. The team worked incredibly hard, I deflected, though the validation from him sent a warm current through me. Marcus leaned forward, his eyes fixed on mine. We both know it was your strategy that sealed the deal. He paused, studying my face. You know, most people would be taking credit, not deflecting it. I'm not most people, I replied. No, he said softly. You're certainly not. The weight of his gaze made me increasingly aware of the unusual setting. The locked door. The intimate lighting. The late hour. Catherine's warning echoed in my mind. Was there something specific about the Westfield account you wanted to discuss? I asked, trying to redirect to safer professional ground. Marcus set his drink down, leaning back in his chair. The movement caused his knee to briefly touch mine, and though he shifted away, the momentary contact left an impression like a spark against my skin. Actually, I wanted to discuss your future at Vertex, he said, his voice shifting to something more personal. I think you've outgrown your current position. My pulse quickened. I've only been senior strategist for 8 months. And you've already transformed the role. His eyes held mine with unexpected intensity. Some people take years to accomplish what you've done in months. The compliment hung in the air between us, charged with something beyond professional appreciation. I found myself struggling to maintain eye contact with him, uncomfortable with the undercurrent I couldn't quite name but could definitely feel. What exactly are you suggesting? I asked, proud of how steady my voice remained despite my internal turbulence. Marcus smiled, reaching for his scotch again. I think that depends on what you want, Olivia. The way he said my name made it sound like a different word entirely. What I want, I repeated, gathering my thoughts. What I want is to continue growing professionally. Marcus nodded, taking another sip of his scotch. Of course. But I think we both know there's more to life than just professional advancement. The conversation was veering into personal territory at an alarming rate. I shifted in my chair, acutely aware of our isolation in the dimly lit office. I'm creating a new position, Marcus continued. Director of Creative Strategy. It would report directly to me, overseeing all our major accounts. My interest immediately peaked despite my discomfort. This was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been working toward. That sounds like a significant step up, I said carefully. It is. He set his drink down and leaned forward, close enough that I caught the subtle notes of his cologne. And you're my first choice for it. The professional opportunity collided with the increasingly personal atmosphere, creating a confusing mixture of ambition and caution within me. What would the role entail exactly? I asked, focusing on the practical aspects. Marcus stood suddenly, moving to his desk to retrieve a folder. I'd drafted an initial description. He returned but didn't hand me the folder immediately. Instead, he perched on the coffee table directly in front of me, his knees now bracketing mine. The position brought him uncomfortably close, looking down at me slightly as he opened the folder between us. Take a look, he said, his voice lower than before. I forced myself to focus on the document rather than our proximity. The position description was impressive: substantial salary increase, leadership responsibilities, direct input on company direction. Everything I'd been working toward. This is quite an opportunity, I managed, aware of how our heads were now bent close together over the folder. I need someone I can trust implicitly, Marcus said. His fingers brushed mine as he turned a page, the contact seemingly accidental but lingering a moment too long. Someone who understands my vision without needing everything spelled out. And you think that's me? My voice had grown inexplicably softer. I know it is. His eyes lifted from the document to meet mine, our faces now inches apart. "We have a connection, Olivia. I've felt it since your first presentation to the executive team." The professional pretense was evaporating rapidly. I should have stood up, should have redirected the conversation, should have mentioned Catherine and HR policies. Instead, I remained frozen in place, caught between alarm and a forbidden thrill. "A connection," I echoed, barely above a whisper. "Don't pretend you haven't felt it too." His hand moved to rest lightly on mine where it lay on the folder. "The way we finish each other's thoughts in meetings. How you seem to anticipate my concerns before I voice them." His touch sent electricity up my arm, and I knew I should pull away. This was precisely the scenario Catherine had warned about, the blurring of professional boundaries, the abuse of power dynamics. Yet something in me hesitated. "Marcus," I began, uncertain what would follow his name, a rejection, a boundary, or something else entirely. "I've been fighting this for months," he continued, his voice intimate in a way that transformed the office into something else entirely. "Telling myself it was inappropriate. That I was imagining it. But I don't think I am." His hand moved from mine to brush a strand of hair from my face, his fingers grazing my cheek in a touch that couldn't possibly be misinterpreted as professional. "What about company policy?" I managed, finding my voice. Marcus's expression shifted, a flash of the powerful CEO returning. "I make company policy." The moment suspended between us, charged with possibility and danger. Marcus's fingers still lingered near my face, his eyes holding mine with an intensity that made it difficult to breathe. I should have moved away, should have reminded him of professional boundaries, should have thought about my career and reputation. But something kept me rooted in place. "This is a mistake," I whispered, though I made no move to leave. "Is it?" Marcus asked, his voice low. "Or is it just unexpected?" His hand cupped my cheek fully now, thumb tracing a gentle line along my jaw. The folder about the promotion lay forgotten between us, a prop that had served its purpose in bringing us physically closer. "You can leave right now," he said softly. "I'll unlock the door, you'll go home, and tomorrow we'll pretend this never happened. The position is still yours either way." The assurance should have made it easier to walk away. Instead, it removed the final barrier, the fear that my professional advancement hinged on this moment. If the role was mine regardless, then whatever happened next would be purely my choice. "Or?" I breathed, already knowing the answer. "Or you stay," Marcus replied, "and we stop denying what's been building between us for months." My mind raced with implications, office gossip, HR violations, the potential unraveling of the career I'd worked so hard to build. But alongside these rational concerns ran a current of something more primal, desire, curiosity, and the intoxicating pull of being truly seen by someone I'd admired. "What about your wife?" I asked, grasping for reasons to resist. A shadow crossed his face. "That's been over for years. We're separated. Have been for 6 months." I hadn't known, though I'd noticed the disappearance of family photos from his desk recently. The revelation removed another obstacle, another excuse. "Catherine already suspects," I said, thinking of the HR director's warning. "Catherine suspects everyone," Marcus countered. "She's paid to be paranoid." His face was now inches from mine, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath. The professional distance we'd maintained for 2 years had collapsed into intimate proximity in the space of minutes. "I've thought about this," he admitted, his voice rough with restraint. "About you. More than I should have." The confession sent a shiver through me. I'd imagined his interest was one-sided, my own misreading of professional mentorship. To hear that he'd been thinking of me, wanting me, shifted something fundamental between us. "This changes everything," I whispered. "Only if we let it." I knew the moment his lips would meet mine before it happened. Knew I should turn away, stand up, remind him of our professional relationship. Instead, I remained motionless as he leaned forward, closing the final distance between us. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning, giving me every opportunity to pull away. When I didn't, When instead I responded with a hunger that surprised us both, the restraint between us shattered. His hands framed my face as the kiss deepened, drawing me toward him until I was perched on the edge of my chair. My fingers clutched the lapels of his suit jacket, anchoring myself as the room seemed to spin around us. The professional boundaries I'd maintained so carefully had dissolved completely, replaced by a connection that felt simultaneously wrong and inevitable. When we finally broke apart, both breathing harder, Marcus rested his forehead against mine. "I've wanted to do that since the Harrington presentation," he confessed. "That was 6 months ago," I said, surprised. "I'm aware." His smile held a mixture of satisfaction and lingering hunger. "I've been very patient." Reality began to return in slow waves. I was kissing my boss in his locked office. Crossing lines I'd promised myself I never would. Becoming a cliché I'd always disdained. "We can't do this here," I said, my voice unsteady. Marcus nodded, reluctantly creating space between us though his hand remained curved around my neck. "Come to dinner with me tomorrow. Somewhere private, away from the office. Where we can figure out what this is." The invitation required a deliberate choice. This wouldn't be something I could blame on a moment of weakness or surprise. It would be a conscious decision to pursue whatever was developing between us. "Yes," I heard myself say, already knowing everything had changed irrevocably. His smile was triumphant, the expression of a man who'd gotten exactly what he wanted. He leaned in for one more brief kiss before standing and offering his hand to help me up. "I'll text you the details," he said, voice returning to something closer to its usual professional tone, though his eyes still held the heat of what had transpired. As he moved to unlock the door, I stood on unsteady legs, trying to compose myself. Every rational part of me knew I was making a dangerous choice. Yet as I watched him, powerful, confident, now looking at me with undisguised desire, I couldn't bring myself to regret it, not yet, anyway. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I relived the moment in Marcus's office, his lips on mine, his hands framing my face, the way everything had shifted in an instant. The rational part of me knew I should cancel the dinner, send a professionally worded email explaining that we'd made a mistake and needed to maintain appropriate boundaries. But another part, a part one barely recognized, couldn't stop replaying that kiss, couldn't stop wondering what would happen next. Morning came with no clarity. I stood in my shower, letting hot water cascade over me as I tried to think rationally. I had worked too hard to risk my professional reputation on an office affair. I'd seen what happened to women who dated their bosses, the rumors, the undermined credibility, the questions about every promotion or achievement. Was I really willing to become that woman? Yet Marcus wasn't just any boss. He was brilliant, visionary, someone whose mind worked in ways that fascinated me. The connection he'd spoken of wasn't imaginary, I had felt it too, that spark of recognition when we approached a problem from the same angle, when we reached the same conclusion simultaneously. Was that professional admiration, or something deeper that I'd been denying? "This is insane," I told my reflection as I applied mascara with less than steady hands. "You're going to ruin everything you've worked for." Still, I found myself choosing my outfit with more care than usual, selecting a deep burgundy dress that I knew was both professional and flattering, a delicate gold necklace that drew attention to my collarbones. These weren't choices for a woman who intended to end things. The office was its usual bustling chaos when I arrived. The creative team was arguing about typography choices for a sportswear campaign, account managers were on calls with clients, interns rushed between departments with coffee orders and printouts. No one seemed to notice anything different about me, even though I felt like I must be radiating yesterday's encounter from every pore. I made it to my desk without incident, forcing myself to focus on the day's tasks. The Robertson pitch needed final revisions, and I had a call with the Westfield team at 11. But concentration proved impossible. Every time the elevator dinged, I looked up, wondering if it was Marcus. Every time my phone buzzed, my heart jumped, thinking it might be a message from him. When Lisa stopped by my desk, I nearly jumped out of my skin. "You okay?" she asked, eyebrow raised. "You seem jumpy." "Just caffeinated," I lied, shuffling papers on my desk to avoid meeting her eyes. "Right," she said skeptically. This wouldn't have anything to do with your mysterious meeting with Bennett yesterday, would it? My head snapped up. How did you know about that? Lisa grinned. Diana was complaining that he locked himself in his office with you for nearly an hour. She's been trying to figure out why. I forced a laugh that sounded hollow even to my ears. Just reviewing the Robertson strategy. Nothing exciting. Before she could press further, my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced down to see Marcus's name on the screen, 8 p.m. tonight. La Maison Bleue. I'll send a car. Looking forward to continuing our conversation. My stomach fluttered. La Maison Bleue was one of the most exclusive restaurants in the city, intimate, elegant, and very romantic. Not the kind of place a CEO took an employee to discuss business. Earth to Olivia, Lisa said, waving a hand in front of my face. Who's that from? You're blushing. No one, I said quickly, flipping my phone over. Just a reminder about a personal appointment. Lisa's eyes narrowed. Uh-huh. No one but making you blush like a teenager. Interesting. When she finally left, I sat staring at Marcus's text, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to cancel, to retreat to the safety of purely professional boundaries. But another part, the part that had felt more alive in his arms than I had in years, was already composing a reply. Looking forward to it, I texted back. With just those 4 words, I felt like I'd crossed another line from which there was no easy return. I glanced toward the executive floor, wondering if Marcus was in his office, if he was thinking about me the way I was thinking about him. The internal conflict was exhausting, the thrill of what was happening battling with fear of the consequences, desire warring with self-preservation, but underneath it all, impossible to ignore, was the simple truth: I wanted to see where this would lead. And for the first time in my carefully planned life, I was willing to risk everything to find out. The Robertson pitch went perfectly. The client loved our campaign concept, particularly the sustainability angle I'd insisted on. Throughout the presentation, Marcus maintained his usual professional demeanor, his comments focused entirely on the business at hand. Only once, when passing me the presentation remote, did his fingers brush against mine in a way that couldn't have been accidental. The brief contact sent a jolt through me that I struggled to conceal. As the client team filed out, Marcus addressed the room. Excellent work, everyone. Olivia, could you stay behind to discuss next steps? His voice gave nothing away, but my pulse quickened nonetheless. The conference room emptied quickly, leaving us alone. Marcus closed the door, then turned to me with a smile that transformed his face from CEO to the man who had kissed me so passionately the night before. You were brilliant in there, he said, moving closer. Just doing my job, I replied, attempting to maintain some professional distance despite the electricity I could feel building between us. Is that all it was? He was standing in front of me now, close enough that I could smell his cologne. Because from where I was sitting, it looked like more than that. It looked like passion. I swallowed hard. Marcus, we're at work. I know. His eyes held mine, intense and unwavering. But I haven't been able to think about anything but you since last night. Before I could respond, his lips were on mine, his hands drawing me against him. Any resistance I might have offered melted away instantly. I kissed him back with an urgency that surprised even me, my fingers tangling in his hair as if I could somehow pull him closer than was physically possible. The risk of discovery only heightened every sensation, the softness of his lips, the strength in his arms as they wrapped around me, the heat building between us. This wasn't the questioning, tentative kiss of last night. This was desire unleashed, made more intense by the danger. Marcus backed me against the conference table, lifting me slightly so I was perched on its edge. His hands moved to my waist, then slid upward, tracing the curve of my ribs before brushing the sides of my breasts through my dress. I gasped against his mouth, my body arching toward his touch. We shouldn't be doing this here, I whispered, even as my legs parted to allow him closer. I know, he murmured against my neck, his breath hot on my skin. Tell me to stop. But I couldn't. Every rational thought had been driven from my mind, replaced by a need that seemed to consume me from the inside out. I pulled him back to my mouth, kissing him deeply as his hands continued their exploration. The sudden knock on the door was like a bucket of ice water. We sprang apart, Marcus turning away to adjust his tie while I smoothed my dress with trembling hands. "Come in," Marcus called, his voice remarkably steady. Diana, his assistant, opened the door. Her eyes moved between us, lingering on my flushed face and slightly mussed hair. "Your 2 o'clock is here," she said, her tone neutral but her gaze suspicious. "Thank you, Diana. I'll be right there." Marcus turned to me, professional mask firmly in place. "Email me those metrics we discussed, Ms. Chen." "Of course, Mr. Bennett," I replied, gathering my presentation materials with hands that weren't quite steady. As I walked past Diana, I could feel her eyes on me, assessing, judging. Had she guessed what we'd been doing? The thought sent a wave of embarrassment through me, followed quickly by a thrill that was harder to explain. The secret knowledge of what had almost happened, of what would happen later, was like a fire in my veins. Back at my desk, I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept returning to the conference room, Marcus's hands on my body, the way he'd looked at me, the hunger in his kiss. The line we'd crossed couldn't be uncrossed. We were no longer just boss and employee with an attraction. We had acted on that attraction, and nothing would be the same. My phone buzzed with a text from Marcus, "Still 8 p.m. I can't wait to have you all to myself." As I stared at those words, I knew that tonight would change everything. And despite all the reasons I should be terrified, all I felt was anticipation. The morning after our dinner at La Maison Bleue was surreal. I walked into the office with Marcus's taste still on my lips, the memory of his hands on my skin, the sound of his voice whispering my name. We had spent hours in his penthouse apartment, exploring each other with a hunger that seemed impossible to satisfy. It should have felt wrong, he was my boss, after all, but nothing in my life had ever felt more right. Now, standing in the elevator surrounded by colleagues heading to their normal workday, I felt like I was living in two worlds simultaneously. In one, I was Olivia Chen, senior campaign strategist, focused and professional. In the other, I was a woman consumed by a passion I'd never experienced before, counting the hours until I could be alone with him again. The doors opened at the executive floor, and Marcus stepped in with a few of the board members. His eyes met mine briefly, a secret smile playing at the corners of his mouth before he turned to continue his conversation about quarterly projections. No one would have guessed that just hours ago, he had been whispering promises against my skin as we moved together in his bed. "Morning, Olivia," he said casually as the others nodded in my direction. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett," I replied, proud of how steady my voice sounded despite the heat rising to my cheeks. I exited at the next floor, feeling his eyes on me as I walked away. The day stretched ahead, filled with meetings and calls and all the usual tasks, but now there was an undercurrent of anticipation that made even the most mundane work somehow thrilling. At my desk, I found a folder with a note attached, "Need your input on these projections. My office, 3 p.m. MB." His handwriting was bold and decisive, just like everything else about him. I tucked the note into my pocket, where I could touch it throughout the day like a talisman. Lisa stopped by mid-morning, perching on the edge of my desk as usual. "So? How was your mysterious date last night? You practically ran out of here." I kept my expression neutral. "What makes you think I had a date?" She rolled her eyes. "Please. The dress, the extra makeup, the way you kept checking your phone." "I have eyes, Olivia." I shrugged, trying to seem casual. "It was fine. Nothing special." Her tone made it clear she didn't believe me. "That's why you're glowing like you swallowed the sun." Was I? I hadn't noticed, but now that she mentioned it, I did feel different, lighter somehow, as if gravity had slightly loosened its hold on me. "Just had a good night's sleep," I lied. "Right. Sleep." Lisa winked. "Well, whoever he is, he's good for you. I haven't seen you smile this much in, ever, actually." After she left, I wondered what Lisa would say if she knew the truth. Would she be shocked? Disappointed? Or would she understand how something that looked so wrong on paper could feel so undeniably right? At 2:58, I gathered the projection folder and headed to Marcus's office, my heart racing with anticipation. Diana glanced up as I approached, her expression unreadable. "He's expecting me," I said, trying to sound purely professional. She nodded. "Go ahead." Marcus was on a call when I entered, but he gestured for me to sit. I closed the door behind me and took a seat across from his desk, watching as he wrapped up what sounded like a contentious negotiation. In his CEO role, he was commanding, authoritative, so different from the tender, passionate man who had held me through the night. When he hung up, his entire demeanor changed. The mask dropped, and suddenly he was my Marcus again, eyes softening as they took me in. "Hi," he said simply, his voice warm. "Hi." He moved from behind his desk to sit in the chair beside mine, close enough that our knees almost touched. "I've been thinking about you all day." "Me too," I admitted. "It's hard to focus." "I know." He glanced at the closed door, then back to me. "But we need to be careful here. Diana suspects something." I nodded, remembering the way his assistant had looked at me. "What do we do?" Marcus reached for my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "We compartmentalize. At work, we're professional, no lingering looks, no private meetings unless absolutely necessary. Outside." His grip tightened. "Outside, you're mine." The possessive note in his voice sent a shiver through me. "And when do I get to see you outside?" His smile was slow and full of promise. "Tonight. Tomorrow. Every night you'll let me." 2 months into our secret relationship, I realized I was falling in love with Marcus. It wasn't just the physical connection, though that remained as intense as ever. It was the way he'd call me late at night just to hear my voice, the coffee he'd have waiting on my desk some mornings with no note or explanation needed, the way he listened when I spoke as if my thoughts were precious gifts. We had settled into a rhythm that somehow worked, despite all the reasons it shouldn't. At the office, we maintained a careful professional distance, our interactions cordial but never crossing any visible lines. No one would have guessed that most nights we fell asleep in each other's arms, sharing dreams and fears and everything in between. Marcus had begun to open up about his marriage, how it had crumbled slowly, two people growing apart until they were essentially strangers living parallel lives. "I was lonely even when we were in the same room," he confessed one night, his head resting on my chest. "I didn't realize how lonely until I met you." These quiet moments of vulnerability touched me more deeply than the passion. Marcus Bennett, the confident CEO who commanded every room he entered, allowing me to see his doubts, his regrets, his hopes, it felt like a privilege I hadn't earned but desperately wanted to deserve. One evening as we sat on his balcony, sharing wine and watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold, Marcus turned to me with unexpected seriousness. "Olivia, there's something I need to tell you." My heart stuttered, anxiety immediately flooding my system. This was it, I thought, the moment he would end things, tell me it had been fun but it was time to move on. I braced myself, forcing a calm expression. "I've been offered a position in London. The board wants me to head our European expansion." This was worse than I'd imagined. Not just ending our relationship, but leaving the country entirely. I struggled to breathe, to think. "When?" I managed to ask, my voice barely above a whisper. 3 months from now. It's a 2-year commitment, minimum." The silence stretched between us as I processed this, tried to imagine my life without him in it. The thought was surprisingly painful, as if someone had reached inside my chest and squeezed. "I turned it down," he said quietly. My head snapped up. "What?" "Marcus, that's a huge opportunity. You can't just." "I turned it down because I can't imagine being away from you." His eyes held mine, intense and serious. "I'm in love with you, Olivia. I think I have been since that first night in my office." The words hung in the air between us, momentous and terrifying and wonderful. No one had ever given up something so significant for me before. The knowledge that he valued what we had built together more than his career ambitions shifted something inside me, broke down a wall I hadn't realized I'd been maintaining. I love you too, I said, the words flowing naturally. Inevitably, his smile was radiant as he pulled me into his arms. Then we'll figure this out together. That night, something changed between us. The secrecy that had felt exciting now felt constricting. I wanted to walk beside him in public, to claim him openly as mine, to stop living this double life. What if we went public? I whispered as we lay in bed later. What if we stopped hiding? Marcus propped himself up on one elbow, studying my face in the dim light. Are you sure? There would be consequences. Office gossip, maybe worse. I nodded slowly. I'm tired of sneaking around. I want a real relationship, not just stolen moments. He kissed me softly. Then that's what we'll do. I'll talk to HR on Monday, disclose the relationship officially. We'll face whatever comes together. As I drifted off to sleep in his arms, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced since our relationship began. Finally, we could stop hiding, stop pretending. Finally, what we had could exist in the light. I had no idea how difficult that light would be to face. The plan to go public with our relationship was set. Marcus would speak to HR on Monday, I would tell Lisa and my team on Tuesday, and by Wednesday, we would no longer need to hide. We spent the weekend in a bubble of anticipation, making plans and dreaming of a future where we could simply be together without the exhausting web of lies. Monday morning arrived, and I walked into the office with a nervous energy I couldn't quite contain. Today was the day everything would change. I sat at my desk, trying to focus on work while waiting for Marcus to let me know he'd spoken with Catherine in HR. Around 11 a.m., my phone buzzed with a text from him, meeting running long. We'll take care of HR after lunch. Can't wait to start our real life together, I smiled, tucking my phone away just as Nathan approached my desk. Team lunch at Mercado's, he announced. Client just approved the campaign budget, we're celebrating. You in? I nodded, grateful for the distraction. Sure, I could eat. Lunch with the team was a welcome diversion, jokes and shop talk and excited discussion about the newly approved campaign. I was laughing at one of Lisa's stories when I glanced toward the restaurant entrance and froze. Marcus had just walked in, and he wasn't alone. Elise, his wife, estranged wife, I reminded myself, was with him, her hand resting on his arm as they followed the hostess to a table. Olivia? You okay? Lisa asked, noticing my sudden silence. Fine, I said automatically, my eyes still locked on Marcus and Elise. They were seated now, heads bent close in conversation. I couldn't see Marcus's expression from this angle, but Elise was smiling, looking more relaxed and happy than I would have expected from a woman in the middle of a separation. Isn't that Bennett? Nathan had followed my gaze. Who's the woman? His wife, Lisa replied. I think they've been having problems, but maybe they're working things out. The casual comment hit me like a physical blow. Working things out? After everything Marcus had told me about their failed marriage, after his declaration of love just days ago, was he considering reconciliation? I excused myself, heading for the restroom on shaky legs. Once inside, I leaned against the sink, trying to calm my racing heart. There had to be an explanation. Maybe this was a final meetup to discuss divorce details. Maybe Elise had insisted on seeing him. Maybe, the door opened, and Elise herself walked in. She paused when she saw me, recognition flickering in her eyes. We had met at company functions before, back when I was just Marcus's employee, nothing more. Olivia, right? She said pleasantly. You work with Marcus. I nodded, not trusting my voice. He speaks highly of you, she continued, moving to the mirror to check her lipstick. Says you're one of the most talented people on his team. I mumbled a thank you, desperate to escape but trapped by politeness. Elise turned to face me directly. Actually, I'm glad I ran into you. Marcus mentioned you've been working closely with him on some special projects. I wanted to thank you for that, it's given him something positive to focus on during a difficult time. The irony of her gratitude was almost unbearable. I managed a tight smile. The separation has been hard on both of us, she continued, seemingly oblivious to my discomfort, but I think we're turning a corner. Sometimes you need distance to remember what's important. My heart sank. This wasn't a divorce meeting. This was reconciliation. I excused myself as quickly as politeness allowed, returning to my team's table with my mind in chaos. Throughout the rest of lunch, I couldn't stop myself from glancing at Marcus and Elise, noticing the easy familiarity between them, the way she touched his hand occasionally, the way he leaned in to hear her better. Back at the office, I waited for a text, a call, any explanation. Nothing came. At 5:30, I was packing up to leave when Marcus appeared at my desk. My heart jumped. Finally, an explanation. Got a minute? He asked, professionally neutral. I followed him to an empty conference room, closing the door behind us. You saw me at lunch, he said without preamble. With Elise? Yes. It's not what you think. She seems to think you're reconciling, I said, fighting to keep my voice steady. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. She wants to try again. I told her I needed time to think. The words landed like a blow. Time to think? After everything you said to me? Olivia, it's complicated. We have history, children, and did you talk to HR about us today? I interrupted, already knowing the answer. His silence was confirmation enough. I see, I said, a strange calm settling over me. So much for starting our real life together. The week after seeing Marcus with Elise was excruciating. He kept trying to explain, to assure me that he wasn't considering reconciliation, that he just needed time to handle the situation delicately. I wanted to believe him, but doubt had taken root, growing stronger with each passing day. She surprised me with that lunch, he insisted during a stolen moment in his office. I didn't know she was planning to suggest we try again. And what did you tell her? I asked, keeping my distance despite his attempts to draw me closer. That I needed time to think, but that I didn't see how we could go back. But you didn't tell her about me. It wasn't a question. Marcus sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture I once found endearing but now saw as a sign of his uncertainty. No, I didn't. It would only hurt her unnecessarily. And what about hurting me? The words escaped before I could stop them. More vulnerable than I wanted to be, his expression softened. Olivia, please. I'm trying to handle this properly. Give me a little time. I wanted to trust him, to believe that what we had was real and lasting. But the seeds of doubt, once planted, were difficult to uproot. To complicate matters further, the atmosphere at work had shifted. Diana's cool suspicion had evolved into outright hostility, evidenced in small ways, forgetting to relay my messages to Marcus, scheduling meetings during times she knew I was available, excluding me from communications I should have been part of. You've made an enemy there, Lisa observed after witnessing a particularly frosty exchange between Diana and me. What did you do, steal her stapler? I forced a laugh. Who knows? Maybe she's just having a bad month. But we both knew it was more than that. Diana had worked with Marcus for years, was fiercely protective of him, and had clearly decided I was a threat. Then came the conversation with Catherine from HR that confirmed my worst fears. She called me into her office on Tuesday afternoon, her expression grave as she gestured for me to sit. Olivia, I want to talk to you about something sensitive, she began, her tone deliberately neutral. It's been brought to my attention that there may be some boundary issues between you and Marcus Bennett. My stomach dropped. Boundary issues? Catherine's gaze was steady. There have been concerns raised about the nature of your professional relationship. Late-night meetings, unusual levels of communication, certain behaviors that might suggest more than a standard employer-employee dynamic. Who raised these concerns? I asked, though I already knew. That's confidential, Catherine replied smoothly. I'm not here to make accusations, just to remind you of our company policies regarding relationships between managers and their reports. She slid a copy of the policy across the desk to me. The key section was highlighted: all romantic or sexual relationships between managers and their direct or indirect reports must be disclosed to human resources immediately. I'm sure there's nothing to discuss, Catherine continued, watching me closely, but I wanted to make the policy clear. Undisclosed relationships represent a significant conflict of interest and can lead to termination for both parties. The threat was thinly veiled but unmistakable. Someone, Diana, most likely, had reported suspicions about Marcus and me, and now HR was watching. Thank you for clarifying, I said, standing to leave. But there's nothing to disclose. The lie felt bitter on my tongue, but what choice did I have? Marcus hadn't been ready to go public, and now it seemed the decision might be forced upon us. I texted him immediately, we need to talk. HR knows, his response came quickly, my office. 5 p.m. The hours crawled by, each minute stretching endlessly as I contemplated the increasingly precarious position we were in. By the time 5 p.m. arrived, I had cycled through anger, fear, and a strange resignation. Whatever happened in Marcus's office would determine not just our relationship, but my entire career. Olivia, please. Marcus's voice cracked slightly as he reached for me across his desk. You know it's not that simple. It could be, I said, standing my ground. If you really wanted it to be. We stood in his office, the setting sun casting long shadows through the windows. Outside, the regular rhythms of the workday continued, phones ringing, distant conversations, the hum of printers, while inside, something was breaking apart. I need to think about my kids, he said finally. If Elise and I can find a way forward, even just as co-parents, stop. The word came out sharper than I intended. Just stop. This isn't about your kids. This is about you not being willing to choose. His jaw tightened. That's not fair. Isn't it? I could feel myself trembling, months of hidden emotions suddenly bubbling to the surface. You've been telling me you love me, that what we have is special, that you want a future with me. But when it comes to actually doing anything about it, you hesitate. You delay. You find excuses. They're not excuses, he insisted, running a hand through his hair. There are real considerations here, my position in the company, the potential fallout, my children, and where do I fit into all these considerations? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. Because right now, it feels like I'm just an afterthought. Something you enjoy in private but aren't willing to acknowledge in public. Marcus moved to the window, his back to me. You know how much you mean to me. Do I? I crossed my arms, suddenly feeling cold despite the warmth of the office. Because your actions and your words don't match, Marcus. You say you love me, but you're not willing to fight for us. He turned, his expression pained. I am fighting. Just not in the way you want me to. The words hung between us, heavy with all they revealed about the fundamental disconnect in our perspectives. To him, caution and secrecy were forms of protection. To me, they felt like rejection. I can't do this anymore, I said softly, the decision crystallizing even as I spoke the words. I can't keep being the woman you hide. What are you saying? Alarm flashed across his face. I'm saying it's over. The words hurt to say, but they also brought a strange relief. I need more than stolen moments and secret meetings. I need someone who's proud to be with me, not someone who treats me like a guilty pleasure. Olivia, don't do this. He crossed the room in 2 quick strides, taking my hands in his. I love you. We can figure this out. I looked up at him, memorizing the lines of his face, the depth in his eyes, the way his mouth curved when he was earnest. I had loved this man with an intensity that surprised me, had risked my career and reputation for him. But I couldn't continue sacrificing my dignity and self-respect. I love you too, I said, gently freeing my hands from his. But sometimes love isn't enough. I gathered my courage and turned to leave, each step toward the door requiring more strength than I thought I possessed. As I reached for the handle, his voice stopped me. What if I tell Elise tonight? What if I come clean with HR tomorrow? Would that change things? I paused, not turning around. Why now, Marcus? Why not a week ago, or a month ago, or the first time we kissed? Why does it take me walking away for you to finally be ready? He had no answer, and that itself was answer enough. Goodbye, Marcus. Walking out of his office felt like leaving a part of myself behind. I moved through the now empty halls on autopilot, grateful that most of the staff had already gone home. I didn't want anyone to see the tears I could no longer hold back. As I reached the elevator, my phone buzzed with a text from him. Please, Olivia. Don't end this. I'll do whatever you want. Too little, too late, I thought but didn't write. Instead, I turned off my phone and rode the elevator down in silence, wondering how something that had felt so right could end up causing so much pain. I called in sick the next day, unable to face the thought of seeing Marcus or pretending everything was normal. I needed space to process what had happened, to begin the difficult work of extracting him from my heart. But the universe had other plans. My doorbell rang at 10 a.m. Assuming it was a package delivery, I opened it without checking the peephole, a mistake I regretted immediately. Elise Bennett stood in my hallway, elegant in a cream-colored suit, her expression a carefully controlled mask of politeness. "Hello, Olivia," she said, her voice deceptively calm. "I think we need to talk." My mind went blank with panic. How had she found my address? What did she know? I tried to compose myself, grasping for any semblance of normalcy. "Elise. This is unexpected. May I come in?" She didn't wait for an answer, stepping past me into my apartment. Her gaze swept over the space, taking in the half-empty wine glass from the night before, the throw blanket rumpled on the couch, the framed photos on my shelves. I watched her, frozen between terror and resignation. "You have a lovely home," she said, but her eyes had stopped on something specific. I followed her gaze to my coffee table, where Marcus's cufflinks lay gleaming in the morning light. He had removed them 3 nights ago and forgotten them. A small, damning detail. "How long?" Elise asked, turning to face me. "How long have you been sleeping with my husband?" The direct question, stripped of any pretense, demanded an equally direct answer. 2 months, I said quietly. "But it's over now." She laughed, a short, bitter sound. 2 months. While he was telling me he needed space to think about our marriage. While he was having dinner with me and discussing reconciliation. Each word hit like a physical blow. "He was discussing reconciliation with you?" As recently as last week, she confirmed, watching my reaction closely. "He said he thought we could try again, for the kids' sake." The room seemed to tilt slightly. Even after everything, even after our confrontation yesterday, I hadn't imagined Marcus would continue to lie so completely. "I didn't know," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "No, I don't suppose you did." Elise's expression softened fractionally. "He's very good at telling people what they want to hear. I should know, I've been married to him for 17 years. She crossed to the window, gazing out at the city below. "You know what's ironic? I actually came here thinking you were the villain in this story. The young employee seducing my husband during our rough patch." She turned back to me. "But seeing your face just now, I think we've both been played." I sank onto the couch, suddenly exhausted. "How did you find out?" "About us, I mean." Anonymous email. "Someone sent me photos of you two at La Maison Bleue, looking very much not like boss and employee. They also helpfully included your home address." "Diana," I said immediately, the pieces falling into place. Elise nodded. "Marcus's assistant. Always had a thing for him, though he never noticed. Or pretended not to." We sat in uncomfortable silence, 2 women connected by their love for the same duplicitous man. Finally, Elise spoke again. "I came here ready to confront the woman who was trying to steal my husband. But now I'm wondering if we should both just let her have him." The unexpected solidarity in her words loosened something in my chest. "I ended it yesterday," I said. "For what it's worth." "Good for you." She straightened her shoulders, smoothing her already perfect hair. "I'll be doing the same, as soon as I leave here." Elise picked up her purse, moving toward the door with dignified grace. But she paused with her hand on the knob. "You know, the worst part isn't the affair," she said softly. It's the lying. The way he made both of us feel like we were special, like we were the only one who really understood him. She glanced back at me. Don't let him do that to you again. After she left, I sat motionless on my couch, trying to process the surreal encounter. My phone buzzed with another text from Marcus. Where are you? We need to talk. For the first time, I saw his words for what they truly were, not love, not commitment, but manipulation. I deleted the message without responding. An hour later, Lisa called. You need to come in, she said, her voice tense. All hell has broken loose here. I walked into Vertex Marketing for what I knew would be the last time. The office was unnaturally quiet, conversation stopping as I passed through, all eyes following me with a mix of curiosity and pity. News traveled fast. Catherine intercepted me before I could reach my desk, pulling me into her office. I assume you know why I've asked you to come in, she said, not unkindly. I can guess, I replied, a strange calm settling over me. On her desk lay a formal letter of termination, the language clinical and precise, violation of company policy, failure to disclose a conflict of interest, irreparable damage to professional relationships. And Marcus? I asked, not needing to complete the question. Catherine's expression softened slightly. The board has asked for his resignation. Diana forwarded certain communications to multiple board members this morning. His position is no longer tenable. So that was Diana's endgame. Not just exposing our affair, but destroying Marcus completely. I wondered if she'd expected to be rewarded for her loyalty, or if revenge had been satisfaction enough. You'll receive 3 months severance, Catherine continued. And the company won't contest unemployment benefits. A small mercy, but it wouldn't repair my damaged reputation or ease the pain of everything I'd lost. I signed the paperwork mechanically, feeling strangely detached from the process. As I packed my desk, Lisa hovered nearby, helping me sort through years of accumulated files and mementos. What will you do now? She asked. I don't know, I admitted. Start over, I guess. Just as I was placing the last of my belongings into a cardboard box, my phone buzzed with a text. Marcus again, please let me explain. Meet me tonight. I need you. I showed Lisa the message. Are you going to go? She asked quietly. 6 months ago, even 1 day ago, the answer would have been yes. I would have gone running at his call, desperate for any explanation that would let me keep loving him. But Elisa's words echoed in my mind, don't let him do that to you again. No, I said, surprised by the certainty in my voice. I'm not. I deleted the message and blocked his number. Walking out of Vertex Marketing for the last time felt like emerging from a long dream. The air outside was crisp and clear, the autumn sun warm on my face. I had lost my job, my reputation, and a man I thought I loved. But standing there on the sidewalk, cardboard box in my arms, I felt something unexpected. Freedom. 6 months later, I sat in a cafe across town, reviewing the business plan for my new marketing consultancy. The first few months had been hard, rejection from potential employers who had heard rumors, financial strain as my severance ran out, nights spent questioning every decision I'd made. But slowly, I had rebuilt. My phone chimed with an email notification, another client referral from Lisa, who had become my biggest champion. She had eventually left Vertex too, unwilling to stay in what she called a toxic environment. We now collaborated regularly, forming a partnership that played to both our strengths. I'd heard through industry gossip that Marcus and Elise had finalized their divorce, that he had taken a position with a competitor after his forced resignation, that Diana had followed him there. None of it mattered to me anymore. The affair that had once consumed my every thought now seemed like a chapter from someone else's story, painful, yes, but also instructive. I had learned my worth, my boundaries, my capacity for both love and self-respect. I had discovered that sometimes walking away, however difficult, is the most powerful choice you can make. As I closed my laptop and gathered my things, I caught a glimpse of my reflection in the cafe window. I looked different now, stronger, more confident, my eyes clearer than they had been in years. I smiled at my reflection, remembering how far I had come. The woman who had walked into Marcus's office that night, desperate for approval and afraid to break rules, was gone. In her place stood someone who understood that true freedom comes not from breaking rules for someone else, but from writing your own.